welcome back. And is anyone here that wasn't here before? Okay, some of you are coming in midway to a conversation. So welcome to our relationship. This is on the court game that we're playing. So just trying to unpack some of these situations, because what we know, just as a little catch up, is there's a lot of principles and practices and ways that we can do grazing management. And there's also a lot of different contexts that we all work and live in. So the trickiest bit that I've seen is we want to find the way to do it, and we're always looking for the right way. And I think the thing that the more we get into this, the more we see that there isn't one way, there isn't a right way, there isn't a best way. So trying to get us into the frame of mind of what are all the things we need to think about and what are all the viewfinders we need to look through so that we can progress our farms and our management and our livestock farming in a way that works for all of us and works for the environment and works for the stock as well. So who runs sheep here? Very good. Any of you doing, I thought I'd bring this up because it's one that I see people bump into quite a lot, but any of you trying to do mob stocking at lambing time? Okay, where's our microphone? Okay. John, how about you run around with the microphone? I'm going to give you a job because you're a busybody. Did I? Excuse me. Yeah, John. Oh, there you go. Oh, good man. John did the Create course with Integrity Soil, so I'm allowed to boss him because I was his coach, and he's very bossable. He's a great man. So we have a woman up here that had a comment. Yes. Thank you, John. How fun is this? My favourite thing is to train sheepdogs. So, get him behind, lie down, and bloody cut it out are quite commonly come out my mouth. So careful, John. Hello, can you say your name and what you farm and where you farm, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Dinah Nabarro and Castle in Hampshire.
It's cutting in. It's cutting in and out. So.
Okay. We drift lambed at lambing.
Yep.
And then as soon as we'd finished lambing, we had them on moves behind electric fence, and actually it's been disastrous. I thought we had the ewes well enough trained where it'd be okay, and it hasn't been.
Okay, so we did a drift lambing during lambing, which for those of you I think you'll probably know, but that means that, those that have lambed stay behind and then you move the others forward. And then once they'd all lambed, they were mobbed up. How big was your mob?
It was 100 ewes in a group.
100 ewes in a group. And then when you mobbed them all up, it was disastrous. How was it disastrous? What happened?
Couldn't get them to stay behind the electric.
Okay, how many? Couldn't get them to stay behind the electric. How many wires?
I had to start on 3 and I went up to 4.
Started at 3 wires, went to 4. What was running through the fence? How many volts?
That was probably our biggest issue. There were more than 3.
Oh, okay. Okay, no more than 3 volts. So let me tell you, it's not going to work with your sheep. So I'm always no less than 6. If it doesn't make you jump, it won't make them jump. And sheep can be right buggers at the best of times. So how old were the lambs and ewes when you finally mobbed them up? How old? How old were the lambs?
When we start, 2 or 3 weeks.
So, okay, 2 or 3 weeks. All right. So I'm going to deal with this one with a little story. I grew up in a wee place called Huiroa, and I went to a school that had 18 children from age 5 to 12. So by the time you were 12, you were kind of the other teacher if you had half a brain in your head. So I had at least quarter of a brain, so I got to teach the little kids how to read and do their math and that sort of thing, and you thought you were pretty much had the world sorted. And then I went to high school, and I went to a high school of 1,000 kids. And let me tell you, the adjustment was horrible. I was bullied, and my defense was to become the bully. So I got a pretty good right hook and took care of things and got the name of Matthew's Monster quite quickly. Not proud of that, but we all adjust to the environment we're in. And my own personal experience with doing any sort of mob stocking at lambing time is just that. It's like you really have to go slow to go fast. And if you think about, I struggle going from 18 kids to 1,000 kids. Imagine if you went from 18 kids to Tokyo or London. Okay, so you did do a bit of a gradual shift. Okay, so she did a gradual shift, 2 or 3 weeks. Here's what I'll say, is you possibly still moved too quickly. And I think it's a little bit like a lot of what we're dealing with. I do feel that go slow to go fast. Do the background work. And personally, I love drift lambing, but I will make sure that those ewes and lambs maybe go from one paddock where there's 10 or 15 or 20 of them to another one, so now it's 40. And they may stay there for 4 or 5 or 6 days or a week because they need to adjust. They need to learn to find mum amongst a growing population, and then they need to learn to stay with mum when they go through the gate. They need to learn that a gate is something you go through, because otherwise you've got another problem called, now we've got to catch the lamb and it's on the road. And now I really am yelling at the dog, and the neighbours think I'm a bit cuckoo. So for your own peace of mind, I think doing a drift lambing and mobbing up at lambing can work, but do not rush it. And I was just at Carbon Calling, and a chap up there said, yep, put 700 ewes and their lambs together, did it too soon. And the amount of mismothering, the loss of production, and then, potential issues you get with mastitis and all sorts of other things. And so, again, if you think from the point of view, we are nature, would you do that to your children? Probably not. So, bringing that empathetic connectedness of how do we do this with some grace, and how do we do this with some real care, not because we need to be all woo-woo, but because we actually are trying to shift the way we view the world from something that is ours, that we manage and dominate, to something that is a fluid extension of us, as is a personal relationship or an intimate relationship. And I for myself, the most intimate relationship I have, well, actually it's not the most intimate one, but my relationship, I'm going to dig a bloody hole here right quickly. I think I should stop there. Anyway, we'll carry on. And my relationship with the land is very intimate. So this is Mungaroa Farms, and this is me doing mob stocking. But you can see these lambs, a few weeks plus old, and now they have been slowly learnt to be in this big, tight family. And it's the slowly that gives us the opportunity. They're also grazing on pretty high covers. So that belief that I grew up with, that short grass is sheep grass, and it has to be short, it has to have a high protein, and lambs do need high protein, ideally 24% or thereabouts, otherwise you just don't get the growth on them. But how can we have grass that is taller and graze it with our sheep and still meet those production targets? And what I've found at Mungaroa Farms, I got there and there was a lot of old, do you call it orchard grass or cocksfoot? Cocksfoot. I always get confused because, I lived in America for quite some time and I'm like, which one do we call it? So I had a lot of cocksfoot, and it was old varieties of cocksfoot that get really clumpy and and the stock won't eat it. And then you drive over the paddock and it's that humpy bumpy thing that you go, oh, this is really not working. And your temptation is to what? Get the mower out. Give it a bloody good hiding. We'll top it and it'll all come back beautifully. And it's those kind of experiences where I really invite you to do your learning. And for myself, being at Mangaroa Farms, and everyone who came to the farm said, oh, you got to get rid of, you need to regrass and get rid of that old stuff. It's no good. And all I've actually done is opened up that soil and encouraged the biological populations or my underground livestock to really flourish. And what I find now is I don't have any humpy bumpy cocksfoot plants. It's like the sheep love them. They love them, they eat them. It's really palatable and they do well on it. So any quick questions about this while we're talking about your... So John's comment was a little cocksfoot plant that's gotten a bit plump is a great piece of shelter for a lamb. And very true. That's where your rushes and sedges and all those other plants come in, as being part of the diversity that we maybe don't see the true value because we're maybe not looking through all that, through those lenses. Just another picture, mobbing stock up. Again, this is the same year. These lambs were doing 300 to 350 grams, for those of you who work in grams a day. This was the first year we had sheep on this place, so we had really clean pasture. And I was always pushing the envelope of how many stock could I put together and would they still perform and grow. And I think under certain circumstances, yeah, you can do that, but you better monitor it. And if it's not looking good from an animal welfare point of view, again, back it off and think about going from 18 children to 1,000 children. I mean, when I came to London, I was sort of like this naive Kiwi girl at just 22. And I was going to make it to Cranbrook in Kent. And I got to London and I got on the tube into London. And then I didn't quite have the nous to figure out that I was underground and there were more trains above ground. So every time I come to London now, I have to laugh at myself and go, we're all on a learning curve and so are our animals. And if we've been farming livestock and it's been set stock and it's had lots of room and it knows the routine, the minute you change the routine, you will upset your animals. Have you ever noticed how upset you get when somebody changes your routine? Why would they be any different? So just having that awareness will have us think differently and perhaps approach things differently. On the electric fencing with sheep, you can't push it. If you don't have, for me, if I don't have a minimum of 5,000 volts going through that wire, then I'm just not even going to bother because they will push it. Looking at that photo, how's it what? I can't quite hear you. Oh, because what I do is I just drive back and forth and sort of squash a little line, and I can get it hot enough that even if some of that grass stands up, because it'll start at 9, it'll go down to 6. So again, having a good earth system, good charges, it's doable, and again, I think quite often we try. How many of you tried something and it didn't work? And did you ever try it again? Yeah, some of you have, some of you haven't. But it's if we get out of that good, bad, right, wrong, and monitor and question ourselves, we will get to that creative side of ourselves, and that's where if we can push that envelope rather than the one of going, oh yeah, I know how to do this. I'm going to come and do a grazing course, and I'll tell you how to do it, and you'll make lots of money, and then I'll sell my book, and I'll make lots of money. Yeah, no, this is your learning curve, and this is your ability to question and trial and just do little stuff. Take those little steps and go, yes, that worked. And because it worked today or this year doesn't mean it will tomorrow, but you will take that learning into the next action and then onwards from there. So, yep. Who does deferred grazing? Great. Who wants to talk to me about their deferred grazing? Tell me what you do, how you do it, what you found. Hang on a minute, I'm just going to repeat that. So 45 cattle onto the worst bit of hill that was utter crap. I'm just repeating what was said, by the way. And? Wow, that's amazing. So a few bales out on the hill just to get the cattle going and then leave them to do their job. And how many years?
5 years. And they get enough area that's like for 5 days at a go and then we shift them.
Yeah, so doing like 5-day breaks. And what changed for you to give yourself permission to do that? Try that. Yeah, the mess around the what? The feed ring. Yeah, your language, I love it. It's like a feed ring, eh? So, there's multiple reasons we do stuff. And I don't know about you guys, but a lot of people I've seen as early adopters into regenerative and somewhat into organics. It's often based around health or based around some financial disaster. But I think we're now getting to the stage where more and more people are going, oh, this looks interesting, I'll try it. So I really take my hat off to you and I acknowledge all of you for the courage it takes to be the people who are trying new stuff, particularly when you've got your neighbours looking over the fence thinking you're a little bit out of left field. So I'm a big fan of deferred grazing. I think locking up part of your farm is a great way to shift it successionally into another level. And if we think about, for those of you here, you start at the beginning of the top of a mountain, everything's very bacterial, you get out into your woodlands and everything's very fungal. So what we're trying to do is to shift what tends to be quite bacterial. A lot of our pastures that we've been set stocking or regularly rotationally grazing and keeping quite short, that tends to encourage our pastures to go bacterial. So that tends to encourage our pastures to want to grow those weeds that we don't want. Occasionally, in some areas, and we'll get into a little bit of this in a wee bit, it tends to make it go fungal and then you grow a lot of woody species. And I will talk about that in a minute. But the thing about deferred grazing is if you let your grass grow to like hay, and like a good hay, it'll have some, or a past it's maybe used by date hay, it'll still have some green material in the bottom. And this photo is the first year I did deferred grazing. So I would put the cattle during the day onto some nice green pasture on a break. And then at night time, I would put them into the deferred area onto a tight break and they would eat a bit of it, get a bit of dry material to balance out their gut because they'd been eating some quite lush green feed during the daytime. And at nighttime, they sort of got the rest of that balance. So their gut microbiome was better balanced. It's a little bit like the difference between us eating just sugar or eating, our 5 or 10 veggies plus a little protein every day. So trying to get that taken care of. And what I find is I often will use cows with calves at foot because that's the time of year, and I'm sure as hell not going to wean calves early. And over the years, I've had zero problems with it, and I find my stock do really, really well. The cows continue to milk, and the calves do well, and everybody learns how to hang out in a close environment. So again, you're teaching your animals that being together, it's a little bit like us. You notice how you all spread out. Some of us like to sit close, but anyway, it's a learnt thing. And one of the things I think is the most important to monitor, and I'm sure you all know this, is monitor what comes out the back end. And you probably do a bit of that with yourself. And you know that if you've got an upset tummy, it comes out rather loose. And if things are too tight, that's a bit uncomfortable as well. So it's the same with our cattle. So we're always looking at those stools, and are they coming out firm but not too firm? Have they got, runny poo? And you often only need to drive around New Zealand and drive past any dairy farm, and you'll see that most of those animals really have some gut issues. And it's because we're feeding them way too high a protein and way too lower fibre. And if you look at your young lambs, in the case of them, they're going to want protein levels at about 24%. But for the rest of our livestock, 16, 18% protein is plenty. And often I'll go to farms in New Zealand and they're in the high 20s and 30s in their protein. So you know damn well it's just squirting out the back end. And we all know what that feels like. So keep an eye on that as a pretty important indicator without having to get too scientific. Anyone do any deferred grazing with sheep? Nope. Yeah. How have you found that? Any issues?
This winter we had some really, really cold weather, and I found that the grass didn't stand up so well after that. Like we had snow and snow and ice, and then walking on it, and it really didn't hold up after it thawed. But that was okay. I just moved them on more quickly. I was lucky that I had plenty to go at, so.
Okay, so a little bit of deferred grazing through the winter. How mature, how old was the pasture when you were going onto it in the winter?
Shut it up August.
Yeah.
August, and then went on to it December one lot, and then January.
Okay, so shut up in August and grazed December and January. Mostly successful, except for when it really got cold, and that was a bit of... So you got trampling rather than utilisation.
Yeah, and just a lot more so than it
Yeah. Yeah, which seems to happen with any weather event. Your utilisation goes down. How many of you are trying to get 80, 90% utilisation in your grazing? Because there's times you might be doing that, right? No? Yeah. There's times a year where you, like your springtime, you come in, and I might be trying to take 90% of it. So I think one of the things with thinking adaptively about your grazing is there is no one right way. Take a third, leave a third, trample a third. Take 50%, leave 50%. Total grazing, take 90%, watch your recoveries. There's so many formulas. And it's like a tool. Don't throw the hammer out because today you only want the chisel. Because tomorrow you need the hammer to hit the chisel. And I think our grazing, the formulas we use, keep them in the forefront as tools. But if you look at what nature does, nature never does the same thing all the time. And it's like the woman who mentioned, you keep going around in a circle with your grazing, but are you changing direction? Are you changing grazing heights? Are you changing your rotation? Are you changing up where you lamb and calve so that you're having different styles of impacts at different years in different areas? And I do think that's where deferred grazing has some real advantages, because you can have a very tight managed approach to building what then becomes your soil organic matter, your soil carbon, your water infiltration, your aeration and gas exchange, your rooting depth. There's a whole lot of benefits. So I've probably got a picture of it in a minute, but pretty much anywhere I go in New Zealand, you do not see this. You dig up most of our pasture and you've got, pretty generally speaking, anything from 25 to 50 millimetres. A good place might have 75 millimetres of roots, and they will not be raster roots like this. And I think you'll find quite a bit of the same thing across this country. Because we keep it short, what happens is those plants are always trying to survive, and they're going to bunch up their roots. They're going to have more mass, and it'll be tighter. And the first thing that happens is it restricts the soil's ability to breathe. And what's the first thing that kills us? A lack of what? Oxygen. So if the soil can't breathe, that's the first thing to shut the system down. And if it can't breathe, chances are that tight, compacted rooting system is going to create a slow infiltration rate, which means it now can't have a drink. So now you're in a bit of doo-doo. So we're looking to promote this kind of rooting system. Some of the results I've got from deferred grazing is if I can have a high stock density, often with my cattle, I'll manage to get up to 600,000 kg a hectare. And this was a side-by-side trial I did a couple of years ago. And when I came off it, this was just a few weeks later. So the moisture in the paddock next door, which had been hayed, the moisture level was 4% compared to 12%. And this was at the end of summer after haying, so we hadn't had a whole lot of rain. So huge difference in that soil's ability to continue to function and grow. The bricks, or do you all know what bricks is? The level of how effectively is your plant photosynthesizing, what's the sugar and the nutrient flow through that plant. So the bricks were 6 in one paddock and 11 the other, so pretty much doubled, which means photosynthesis is twice as effective in that paddock. And whereas we had 2 worms, because it was obviously not being fed and it was pretty dry, to 32 worms. So, a huge difference in activity level. And then, pretty much a third increase in cover from 20,000 kgs of dry matter to 28. So it's not, it took a little bit of management. The thing I loved about that, prior to doing this, I did biology tests. So I had a fungi bacteria ratio of 0.5 fungi to 1 bacteria. So it was highly bacterial. After this, I had a 1-to-1 ratio. So it really shifted remarkably, and organic matter levels, rooting depth, all those things tracked accordingly. So it is and it's not a one-time fix. You will find that if you go back to your standard management practices, you'll lose this quite quickly. So then the next question is, what comes next? And again, it depends. What are your objectives? What's your weather doing? What's your demand, your feed demand? Are you in a dry period? Are you in a wet period? What are all those variables? And can you continue to push this, given we're trying to arrest succession at the level of a grassland, and we're trying to arrest this land successionally as a grassland when what it wants to be is a forest. So this is a real negotiation, and I know I keep using the relationship analogy, but just like you do with your partner, it's a negotiation about what's needed on both sides of the relationship. And we are in relationship. If we're effectively doing this, we are in relationship with our land rather than being the owners and the controllers of this environment, because we don't get to control nature. You only need to open your phone, look at the news, and see that she's got us beat over and over again. And we better start, listening up. Okay, what's happening here? Yes?
As a comparison,
What?
stocking density is that per hectare then? From what we can see in the pictures. Can you see the
Which one?
You said deferred grazing 600,000 kilograms per
Yeah.
hectare.
So
And then you showed us set stocking field. I'm just trying to picture in my mind what that sort of stocking density is.
you're talking about what stocking density is the set stocked?
Yeah, kilograms per hectare.
This particular one, I don't know because it was driving down the road the other day and I thought, oh, that looks just like New Zealand. I should take a picture of that because, that could be New Zealand. I didn't even get the stone wall. The sheep, a little bit different. But other than that, a lot of our country looks like that. And who knows what the stock density is because I'd have to go ask the farmer. Don't know. He probably had the gates open as well. Anyway, what are we looking at here? What's going on?
Under and overgrazing.
Okay, very good. Under and overgrazing. How do we know that?
Areas that have been eaten and not eaten, plus you've got some of those undesirable plants coming up where, over time.
Yep. So we can see we've got some areas that have been eaten pretty low, down to a couple of centimetres, and there's other areas that are a bit taller, and that will be related to what? Someone else? Why are they eating some and not eating others? But yeah, and you probably don't like to eat it around the toilet bowl either, so neither do they. And, one of the things about combining animals is, sheep will eat closer to a cow dung and a cow will eat closer to a sheep dung than they will to one another's, to their own. So there are some opportunities there. What else are we seeing? Somebody else, not you, John. Yeah. No recovery? Well, there is recovery. I mean, those little plants are trying to recover probably every day because it's, yeah, so that's your overgrazing. So are we clear that overgrazing is not the number of animals? It is the plant being exposed to being eaten before it's recovered. Very good. We got that. So what else are we seeing? Well, yeah, there's a few species in there, but there's not a whole lot. And yep, quite possibly. I mean, there's a bit of grass and there's a bit of clover in there if we look closely, but there's not a lot of diversity. There's pretty low diversity. What else are we seeing? Thistles. Yeah? What else? Yep. So what are the thistles telling you? Anyone want to take a stab? Yes. So, I've forgotten your name again. Greg. So Greg just said, I keep dropping that. Are they a release valve weed? Some weeds are a release valve. And usually what you'll find, release valve weeds are the weeds that grow where there's a concentration of something. So when stinging nettles come up under a tree line where everyone's been camping, so what are they trying to release? Or to absorb? They're trying to absorb something. Nitrates, right? So you will see that, but typically if you dig up do you call them Californian or Canadian thistles? What? Creeping thistles. Oh, God, you should beat up on somebody outside your own country, We call them we call them Californian and the Americans call them Canadian, so whatever. Creeping thistles. So what do you find? Who's dug up a creeping thistle? What do you find? So you got long roots, and if you cut one of those roots, what's inside it? It's quite open, isn't it? Yeah, they've got a great big hole. So if you think about it, what do you think that root is trying to do? So it's trying to open up that soil, right? It's a bit like a dock plant or something, anything that's got a taproot. It's trying to open it up and it's going to have it breathe. What else is it doing? Nutritionally. Come on, John, you've got this one. Yeah, so cycling some nutrients from low down. What nutrients might it be cycling for you? Possibly, probably more likely calcium. Yeah. So it's doing a job. Who's it doing the job for? Who is the plant working for? The soil. So who asked the plant to be there? The soil. So I am not woo-woo. But the soil determines, the conditions in the soil determines if the seed germinates. Just like for those of you who are here for the doc story, the plant is trying to do a job for nature. If we keep attacking the plant like it's the problem, when actually it's trying to heal something, it's like picking a scab. You know, you've got a child that keeps, it's like, don't do that. Stop it. It's never going to heal. And what we do every time we cut the thistles or spray the thistles or try and make the animals graze the thistles, we hammer everything else and we stop nature doing the job. So how many of you have ever let a paddock that's got lots of creeping thistles grow to full maturity? Yep, some of you have. What have you found?
Contrary to what my dad says, they don't actually take over the entire farm.
Yeah. So Dad said they were going to take over the farm, and look what happened. Didn't happen. Any other comments? What did you find, John? Oh, interesting. Yep. So the amount of wildlife and insects and stuff that John's commented about, you see, when you dig up a thistle, for those of you who've dug up a thistle, what do you tend to find right around the thistle root? Pardon? Bare ground? No, there's a creature you tend to find. What is it called? Tend to be a little long, you know, slimy. No, try. Worms, earthworms. I guarantee you, when you go home, because, you know, it's that time of year, you've probably all got a few thistles, go dig up a thistle, and I guarantee you, you will find a lot of worms. So one of the things that we know is aeration is the first step in creating an abundance of life in our soils. And that thistle is creating aeration. It's also bringing calcium into the system. And earthworms are little calcium eaters. They love that calcium. And how do you know if an earthworm has enough calcium? Any ideas? Want to take a punt? No, not colour. Not size. The which? The poop? Nope. So if you dig your soil up and your earthworms are really clean and slimy and they're very shiny and they've got lots of slime on them, whatever it's called, you know that there's nutrient available to them. If they've got quite a bit of fine soil stuck to them, tends to be an indicator that there is either not enough calcium or it's not available to them. So there's lots and lots of these little indicators that, you know, over time you'll learn about. You're not going to learn it all today, but you'll learn about and you'll go, oh, now I can start doing the diagnostics. Because what are our considerations for the animals in this picture? What concerns would you have?
Acidosis?
Acidosis?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Because the plant is more likely to be on the bacterial side. So, yeah, I think that.
Okay, so you've found that you've run into that when you set stock? It's just not something I've encountered, so.
I've not set stock in about 7-8 years, so I can't remember.
Okay, fair enough. That's good, thank you. Somebody else?
I'd be worried about intestinal worms. They'd be shitting it out.
Yep.
Eating it up again.
Yep. So that very short pasture, you're going to have a recycling of and a reinfection of intestinal worms. So you're going to have an animal welfare and animal performance issue is one thing. So you're looking through the lens of your livestock. Are they getting enough to eat? And how would you know? Yeah, so if you're seeing them lying down ruminating a lot, You might not see your cattle ruminating a whole lot because they're no longer getting those longer fibers they need to really encourage good rumination. Everything they're eating is little short fibers. So from an animal welfare issue, you can see that there's some things that you might want to consider that could move things one way or another. From a soil biology point of view, what are your concerns and considerations in this picture? Yeah. Compaction. Very good. So you've got short roots. You've got, you're going to immediately end up with probably bacterial dominated soils. Bacterial dominated soils tend to create those very fine little crumbs, and then your soil structure collapses, and then everything gets tightened up even more because of those short roots. So now we're not breathing. Now we're limiting moisture, and we're limiting nutrient cycling. So there's a lot that's not going on that you want going on. So very good observation. Somebody else? From a soil biology point of view, is there anything else you might be worried about? Yeah, John? Great. So if the grass is that short, it's not going to be able to be effectively in relationship to the plant, is basically what John said. So if you have microbes in your system, right? And the way food gets made available to you is through the microbiome in your gut, which is working very well, hopefully. If you started doing an intravenous thing, what's going to happen to your gut? Yeah, it'll atrophy, won't do its job. So what happens is these plants are really struggling, and they're struggling to photosynthesize effectively because we're not letting them grow, which means they're struggling to have a relationship with their microbiome, which means the microbiome in turn can't then cycle those nutrients and that moisture back to that plant. So now we've got a limited amount of dry matter, or a lower level of dry matter production that's way down from what our potential might be. Any other comments on that? And we'll tiggy-boo along. What about here? Comments? You've just walked onto this farm and this is what you see. What are you going to think? Okay, looks overgrazed, and you say that because? Yeah, so overgrazing is not necessarily how low you take it. Overgrazing is, has that plant been regrazed before it's had adequate recovery time? So that's been hard grazed, decked as we'd say in New Zealand, and you can deck something. It's not good or bad. If you deck it in the summer and it's really hot, what's going to happen? What's that? Burns off.
And the soil will get really hot, and you'll kill all the bugs and stuff in the soil because it's boiling.
Yeah, so you deck it, it's summertime, it's a really hot day, the little microbes can't stand because there's no protection, and then you start that downward spiral. But what happens if you've got a little bit of moisture and you leave that? Is it a problem? No. So when we look at these scenarios, and when you drive down the road and look over the fence at the neighbours, it's so easy to pass well, I mean, we all have opinions all the time, but it's so easy to pass a judgment. But unless you've got the context with which this has been done or not done, it's really hard to make any kind of assessment. So I think, again, we haven't dug a hole. Maybe that was this high before it got grazed. We don't know. We haven't dug a hole. We haven't put a thermometer into the ground. We don't know how hot the soil is. We don't know the conditions. But we can see there's some kind of rotation going on. That's actually the university project. So I thought I'd give them a bit of a hard time.
So I had a shepherd that worked for us,
Okay, so the story was I had a shepherd working for me. Finally encouraged him to do some rotational grazing instead of set stocking. He did a rotation or a couple of rotations and then came back and said, I can't keep on top of the grass now, so I'm going to stop doing that. There's something really, there's just a disconnect in there. And I think, again, the one thing we want to stay so far away from is do not make yourself wrong and do not make other people wrong. We're all where we are on this journey, and it is challenging to unlearn. And that's what a lot of us are doing. How many of you grew up in farming families? Yeah. And so you know how it should be done, and you know how it's meant to be done and what the right way is. And you're going to have to unlearn. And I think a lot of people coming into this, they find it easier if they come from non-farming families. One of the things we could do, and somebody mentioned it earlier, is how do we make the soil breathe? Well, soil aeration is a pretty effective way. If you love driving your tractor, it's also quite fun, because you can listen to podcasts and, daydream. And I will say, we live in a busy, distracted world. And we're constantly looking at our phones. And you just need to go out to any restaurant and you'll see people stop talking. They look at their phones and they share little texts back and forth. And I think one of the things I like to do is I love driving. And I ride a motorbike, so I go on long rides on my motorbike. I did 30 days in India last year. That was really fun. Anyway, it's a great time to daydream. And I think if you look at who we are as human beings, I think connecting with that imaginative part of ourselves takes time and space, and it takes a lack of distraction. So one thing we can get on the tractor is a bit of time just to reflect and to be out there looking and pondering. So again, don't make any of this wrong. Just because you like to run a bit of hardware, it's got its upside. How many of you do a bit of aeration, mechanical? Yeah. Yeah, and the little driving round I've done, I can see that, it's some low-hanging fruit. It's not the answer. But if you combine it with some biologicals and some changes in management, the opportunity to really shift your system to a higher level of functionality, because that's really what we're looking for. We're looking to have the soil lift its game as if we were developing an Olympic athlete kind of approach. How else can we do aeration? What do we got here? What's that? Daikon radish. Yep. Beautiful. And you can take them home and eat them. And we've got some clover. Your sunflowers, really good. They don't go as deep, but sunflowers are really great. Mangaroa Farms, we have a market garden. And Sergio, who was or is from Spain, but worked for us for a while. And Sergio, he's like, Jules, I hate the flowers. I just want to grow vegetables, hate the flowers. And I was always banging on, let's grow flowers. I grew tulips, grew all sorts of things. Hate the flowers, don't do that. And then one day he came to me a little bit chagrined and he's like, gotta tell you, those sunflowers, where you put those sunflowers, I know I hated them, but that's the best soil. So, yeah, always, always, always get your spade out, dig a hole, and do your diagnosis there first. The other thing with soil compaction, and this is where your soil test comes in, if you can look from a mineral perspective, what we know is if you can have a 7-to-1 calcium to magnesium ratio, and where your potassium is not excessive, because potassium makes everything tight. If you want tight soils and metabolic problems in your animals, get your potassium levels up there, and be wary of using things like excessive amounts of chicken manure and stuff like that, because it'll send your potassium through the roof. But a tight soil can be a minerally initiated issues. So another reason to check your minerals, so you can do your diagnostics a little bit more robustly and comprehensively. Yeah, calcium, magnesium works like a magnet. Get that right, and it holds space. And that space is where your air and water travel. Anyone taking any land out of your... Oh, yeah. Yes.
Can you still manage your way out of that with grazing or with your deep rooted species and things, or would you do a different type of intervention?
It's another one that it depends. And it's really hard to answer these questions when you haven't gone out and done the diagnostics. But it would depend on what else was going on. Like, let's say you had really high magnesium and a good pH and everything was going sort of well. Other than that, you might use some gypsum. And I've seen quite a bit of, gypsum being promoted. It can be the answer in the right time, in the right place. You might manage your way out of it. You might, allow for deferred grazing or something like that. But again, that's where if you've got a baseline, you can then come back after taking a particular action or set of actions, retest it and go, has that done the job? Now who knows the answer on your farm? Who knows? You do. Yeah. Who's the expert on your farm? It is not that person that comes down the driveway. It's not me. It's not anyone like me. So it needs to be you, and we need you as farmers to have your arms around some of this knowledge just a little bit more comprehensively. So, yeah.
How quickly would you retest? How many months, years do you have?
I would, if I've done an intervention like that, I'm probably going to leave it the whole season. And often if we're testing and retesting in the same sort of time, similar conditions, same time, so you're trying to get as much apples to apples as you can. And if you're looking to see what's happened, it's like a little bit like you've got to give it a little bit of time to do its job. Transitioning land, anyone doing that? Out of forestry? Yep. What's coming up for you and how are you doing it? So does it get clear cut like that? It's not the greatest picture, but lots of New Zealand looks like that. It's pretty much raping and pillaging. Yeah. So clear filling?
Yeah, clear back. But it's more to restore what was underneath the forest. So we've got some boggy mires and some pretty precious habitats underneath.
Got it.
And then it's using conservation grazing to bring it back to what it should be rather than the forest that it turned into by being left alone.
Got it. So it's there to restore something like a boggy marsh or something that is seen as an environmental benefit. Yeah. Yeah. And look, everything we get is an advantage and a disadvantage. So you have a number of programs in this country that are encouraging various things. And in some ways I can see that's to your benefit and use it and take it as the opportunity it is. And in other ways, I think some of those subsidies and programs we get can keep us locked into a system that's not necessarily functioning well or serving us. So just being aware of that, I think, is helpful.
In Britain, you can't cut down any woodland without the Forestry Commission. You've got to have a replanting plan.
Okay, so that comment was, if you're going to cut something down in this country, you have to have a reforesting plan. New Zealand's very busy at the moment selling off its land to a lot of overseas buyers, and there are people who are looking for a quick out for their pollution. So they buy what is really good farmland and they cover it in pine trees. Those pine trees will probably never be harvested. So they'll get big and old and climate will change and we'll have another California on our hands in no time at all, I'm kind of guessing. This little area here, it was above my house when I moved to Mangaroa and it was clear cut in the middle of winter. So it was just a big muddy boggy hole and they trashed it about as badly as you could. and they left all the residual trees. And this is 12 months later. I left it and I grazed it with some cattle. And then this was the following summer. And we don't have the seed bank that you have. You know, you've got hundreds of years here. We've got a fairly short period of time. But this is land that was farmed, and then it went into pine forest. It came out of pine forest, and I left it, and it just turned into this massive trefoil. Lotus major, whatever you guys call it, one of those names, several names. What a beautiful opportunity. So it turned into this, and I don't know if you know, but that's a plant that's a natural anthelmintic. So great, you put your lambs up there in the summertime, and now you've resolved another problem, which was, how do I deal with the parasite problem in young lambs, and how do I get the protein level up? So again, if we wait a while, because the temptation for me was to come in and spray and do all sorts of other things, and I thought, oh, I'll just leave it and see what happens, you know. It was only 50 acres and seemed like a good experiment. So the more often you can have these little test runs, get them under your belt, share your results. How many of you are in local farming groups where you get together? Some of you, yeah? I can't encourage that enough. You know, your peer-to-peer learning is the fun learning. And it's one of the things I've always loved about Nicole Masters. And when they started a group in New Zealand, and it was called Biological Agriculture then, so a few years back, and there was a group of them that got together, and they would get together at someone's house every 6 weeks, and they called it Rifling Through the Underpants Drawer. Because it took courage to expose your farm to a group of peers who were coming to look, not to criticize, but to look with the eyes of what can we learn and what can we do better and what can we contribute back to you. So, you know, as you can imagine, they'd pull out this pair and go, oh my God, really? Or there was this pair that was like, woo, getting a bit fancy over there. So how do you set up those groups where you have a really safe learning environment and encourage each other so you can discover stuff together? This is some of what you call, is it SFI? And you can hay it, right? And you can't fertilize it. And you get all that yellow rattle and stuff, and then you go use it for seeding other places. Anything that you see is, what do you see as benefits and what do you see as the issues or potential challenges? Remembering potentially today's solution is going to be tomorrow's problem. Yeah. So you hay it, and haying is a form of what? Mining. It's extractive, right? So anytime you're haying something, it's extractive. So here we are, we've got this lovely wild meadow. It's got a variety of stuff in it. There's a date that you can and can't do things, is that correct? Who sets the date? The government. What does the government know about the rainfall and the conditions in your land today and tomorrow? Yeah. Yeah, so suddenly we've gone back to that system of Big Brother knows best. And this is you imagine if somebody came in and said, oh, this is what you have to do with your wife or your husband on this day, and you have to do it before this time, and you can't do it before or after, and you have to do it this way. Great, that's really going to go well. We're in relationship here. Having somebody from outside the farm gate tell us how to have that relationship and when we're going to make out or not make out is not going to go well, and it's not going well here either. So what's the potential downside here? Because that's some beautiful soil. Well, succession, right? We're going to think from the point of view of succession. And what we're saying we want, the government is saying, is you want these natural grassland meadows that are full of wildflowers and all the other goodies that you have. So if we continue with this, let's hay it at this time of year, and you can't do this, and you can't put fertilizer, and you can't aerate it, and you can't do all these other practices, where is this going to go successionally, do you think?
You're going to lose all the biological activity of the soil if you're just keeping on cutting it and there's no stock
Bingo.
wrapping on it.
Bingo. So you're going to lose the biological activity of the soil if you keep the same repeated activity that is extractive. Because you're taking something away and you're arresting something at the same or similar point year after year after year, and nature doesn't do that. So as you lose the biological function of this soil, which way is it going to go? And how would you know whether it was going more bacterial or more fungal? Anyone taking a punt at this one? So you're going to assess it by the plants you find. And when we shut this up and do this activity, anyone notice what's the next species that comes in? Pardon? Scrub. Yeah, very good. So you get what? Little roses and slightly woody material? So successionally, you start pushing it to be more fungal, but it's also going to be asleep. So when you get sleepy fungal soil, you'll know it because you'll get less diversity, you'll get more woody species, and then it just won't be as responsive. Your infiltration rates will go down and things will happen. Yes?
So I think, to be fair, this is where it does depend. We've got a lot of, in Norfolk and Suffolk, very much arable dominated.
Yep.
So actually, if you're taking an arable field and putting it in this, I wouldn't quite say whatever you do for the first few years is going to be a benefit. If you're taking what was already a diverse permanent pasture and turning it into this to get the payment, and then are restricted. So this is, I think, very, very much context specific.
Very, very good comment. I don't know if you heard that, but this gentleman has pointed out that this really is context specific, and it's always context specific. So if you're taking land that's been arable and you're trying to put it into these kind of pastures, that's very different than if you're taking something that was pasture and you're trying to push it this direction. And then at some point, remember, this land wants to be a woodland. At some point, you're still needing to be responsible for you're trying to arrest succession. And how do you arrest succession and promote life? Because, yeah. And how do we communicate that as farmers and land managers so that the people in the government can understand us? What's our time?
10 to 4.
Great. Okay, let's just look at animals quickly. And what do we see here? Some shitty bottoms. And what's happening? Yep, very good. It's quite lush. It's quite green. Those calves, that's actually autumn feed. The man got a bit of a rack up on that one. So what are you doing? Shitty little things. He weaned them early, put them out on really lush feed. So what might you do in this circumstance? Feed them a bit of straw or hay, yeah. Balance their diet out with protein and fibre. What else? Yep, reduce the area. What else? Yep, yeah, give them some fibre in the form of hay or baleage or... Yeah, very good point. Now we're fixing a symptom, because actually what the problem is the management. So now we're going to fix the symptom, but we do need to fix the symptom. We need to slow the transit time down for those calves. So yes, firstly there's going to be that, and then there's going to be some education. Any of you use biochar or humates? Yeah, very good up the back. So that's another option when you've got animals that feed's running through them. I don't know if any of you, when you travel, do you carry a little bit of activated charcoal with you? Any of you? Let me tell you, go traveling, go to the pharmacy, get a bottle of activated charcoal. If you ever get tummy upset, what it does is it pulls all those toxin, gets it out of you and binds you up a wee bit. So same thing, your humates and your biochar can be used as a something to remediate this upset tummy. You can just put it out in a dish and let them free choice it. Sometimes I mix it with a bit of molasses to get them eating it, but often you'll find if you've got, and again, it's a learning curve for these animals, but I've got farmers that they put humates out in particular paddocks because the stock will nail it, and obviously something upsets their tummy, and then other paddocks, they just won't touch it. So allowing them to have some choice in the matter is probably helpful. Yes, yes, they do, because dairy farmers have been taught that they need green, vegetative pastures. And what they haven't been taught is that what you need is a balance of proteins and fibers. And you also then, how many of you listen to John Kempf? Great. Write it down. John Kempf, the guy's brilliant. He's an American. He's an agronomist. But he deals with so many different things. But he's got do I have it on here? Don't think I do. He's got a nutrient pyramid. So firstly, when your plants grow, once your plants are growing well, they'll form complete carbohydrates, then they'll form complete proteins, then they form complete lipids and fats, and then they form complete secondary metabolites. If we graze too early, we graze incomplete carbohydrates and incomplete proteins. So therefore, you're going to have it squirting out the back end, and your stock are not going to do well, and they'll have a low level of metabolic issues. So we want to get that plant, and often it's a little bit of more maturity on your plant. It's also getting nutrient density into your plant. A quick story on nutrient density. I am 65. I'm a pensioner. At 51, I couldn't turn over in bed. My body was so broken. I shear sheep again now, so quite happily, and I do it and don't hurt. So what happened was when I went to America, I'd come from New Zealand and England, and I went to a country with no health system. And I thought, well, I'll take up having a wellness system. So I did massage and chiropractor and ate well and did all those things, and I still buggered my body. And then I went to work for a company, for a clinical nutritionist in New Zealand by name of Ben Warren, who started a company called Be Pure. And as I was working for Ben, I started taking a multivitamin that was designed for New Zealand, and we've got quite specific deficiencies in our food. Selenium's one of them, zinc's another. And so I started taking that nutritional supplement, and I found a really good chiropractor. After 1 year, I went back to see John, and he's like, "What's up today?" I said, "Nothing. I've come to give you a hug and a kiss. I can jump the creek, I can ride my horse, I can turn over in bed, and I don't hurt." And that was 14 years ago. So without the building blocks, life doesn't have health. And it doesn't matter if it's you, or if it's your plants, or if it's your animals, and that's where your pasture tissue tests come in, and that's where having a diverse amount of foraging available. So whether it's trees or hedgerows, you guys have a lot of hedgerows. Think about getting more palatable plants as well as the non-palatable ones into your hedgerows, because animals will self-select if given the chance. Well, in New Zealand, we've got a lot of natives that our livestock love. But what are the other palatable plants? Things like your willows and your lime tree. Very good. So do a little bit of research. There'll be people in here that'll know what your stock here eat. Personally, I like to do pasture tissue analysis, and as a stopgap measure, I will use kelp, salt, and trace minerals so that I make sure those young stock in particular have those base minerals and in ample quantity so that they're not, so they just stand a chance. So if it's not in your plant tissue, make sure you're getting it into your animal until you can get it into your plant. If you want to understand plant nutrients, there's a really cool company. There's a lot around the world, but this particular one stands out to me. It's called Fifth Biz Agri, and it's out of New Zealand. This was developed by a vet who realized that we had pastures and therefore animals with deficiencies. But then what we had excesses, but in the middle, we had insufficiencies, and nobody was diagnosing those. And if you've got, particularly in the dairy industry, you see it, you'll have low-level metabolic issues in your cows. So you have more mastitis, more milk fever, more down cows, more bloat. You'll have all those things. What we see is the minute you get your pasture and your soil functioning and your soil biology functioning, a lot of those go away. But if you're testing your pasture, you can start to really line up the nutrient requirements for that livestock class to what's being fed. And that can be a short-term measure until you've got the system really up and going, but it'll deal with that bottom line production gap and deal with your animal health issues. If you want to know your potential, who's using a pasture cage? And good man. Anybody else? Yep. So just put a pasture cage out there and you can see what are they eating and what's the potential growth. And you can come back if you really want to get a bit scientific, dry it, put it in the oven or the microwave, get it dried out, weigh it before you start, weigh it when you end, and you can start measuring how much dry matter you've got. Yeah?
Can I just say something about the willow?
Yes.
So we did sap analysis of bloods in a field.
Yes.
The two that stood out was zinc and cobalt. Over the fence were some willows. We tested the willows and they were full of cobalt.
Brilliant. Did you get that? We tested the pasture and zinc and cobalt were low in the pasture. Over the fence was willow, and what was high in the willow was zinc and cobalt. How many of you have seen your animals go and chomp on a willow? They tend to love it. So like your weeds, test anything so you start to know, oh, golly gosh, if they're eating that, is that because of X, Y, Z? But you need to be a bit of a, Sherlock Holmes here and be the sleuth. What's our time, John? It's 4 o'clock. We better wind it up. Anyone dealing with thatch? Yeah. So what's that? Lack of aeration. Yeah, and a lack of digestion. So you can kickstart that pretty easily. Firstly, you've got to get some air in it. I had this picture up at one place and this guy says, oh, that's my sample. I'm like, oh, bloody hell, I wouldn't be claiming that one. But anyway, it was a very funny moment. And this place, you could peel his soil back an inch. You just peel it back like a carpet. So I don't want to keep you any longer. I think I don't know if any of you have been down to the toe and foot, but there's great ways to apply some of these digestive issues. I was going to touch on a little bit of tree stuff, but I won't. Really, what are some of our crucial considerations? What are your goals? What's the season? Where are you starting from? Because none of you are starting from the same point. What's your livestock class? And what's the age and stage? Are you in the middle of lambing or calving? Is it production? What's your soil type and your fertility? What's your ideal recovery time, and that's seasonally based. What's your sward composition? Are you in the world of ryegrass and clover, or have you already got some diversity? Find out what's happening with your biology, your minerals, and then look at your stock density. You can maneuver a lot of these things around, but step back, give nature some time, give yourself the opportunity to be on this learning curve. It's not going to, we've taken a few hundred years to do a lot of damage. You're not going to fix it tomorrow, but Mother Nature will heal really, really quickly. takes a team. And I think the best thing you can do is go there in good company. Don't do this alone. It's really a fun journey. And like any fun journey, you know, if you're traveling, it's much more fun if you go with somebody. So that's what we're after. Some happy farmers here. And, you know, we want people who are smiling and enjoying their life as a farmer, knowing themselves as people who really make a difference, because you are the difference makers. It's not coming from our politicians. It's not coming from our consumers. They may be a demand for what you do, but you are the people who lead this charge. And I really take my hat off to you, and I thank you, and a huge gratitude for what you bring to this world as change makers and leaders. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.